Sure enough, Maharajji was walking with a companion just by the side of the bus. We all piled out and surrounded him, falling at his feet. Most of the group were seeing him for the first time. I was so overwhelmed by this chance meeting that I was holding onto his feet and crying uncontrollably. After some time, Maharaji said something, and the man with him translated that Maharaji wanted us to follow him in our bus. They got into a bicycle rickshaw and started off down the street. I still could not catch my breath or stop crying and laughing. After having thought about Maharaji for the 2 years since I first had been with him, the unexpected shock of this meeting left me ecstatic and confused. The rickshaw led us through a number of small residential streets, and finally we stopped at a house into which Maharaji hurriedly entered. As we got down from the bus, the first thing I noticed was the smell of Indian cooking coming from the house. As we came up on the porch, the people greeted us as if we were expected. But how could this be? It turned out that earlier this morning, Maharaji had instructed the mothers of the house to prepare food for 34 people who would be arriving in the late afternoon. How did he know? And wasn't it lucky that I had changed my mind and decided we should make the detour? Perhaps there had been no luck involved at all. And now we were in Dada's house, seated on the floor in long rows in the hall and living room. Leaf plates, leaf plates filled with steaming food and cups of hot chai had been set before us. Maharaji sat in the inner courtyard of the house, making sure we were all fed what seemed like twice as much food as any of us could possibly eat. But we did. And then came up the sweets, mountains of sweets. It was during this sweet feeding that I finally took notice of Dada. He was dignified Indian man in his 50s wearing a dhoti, a white shirt, a black vest and carrying a towel over his shoulder. He was moving through the group bare he was moving through the group barefoot with a large bucket of jalebis, a particularly sweet confection which was deep fried in ghee, clarified butter. With his bare hands, Dada was putting big mounds of sticky sweet on each person's plate. It was the second time he had come around. So I covered my plate with my hands and said, "Thank you, but I don't think I can eat anymore." My remark and hands, my remark and hands didn't seem to deter him a bit. He just said, "You must take, you must take. Maharaji says you must take." And with that he deftly moved in around my hand and left a big pile of jalebis on my plate. I was already stuffed to the point of nausea, and the prospect of eating more sweets, which a few minutes ago I would have craved, now seemed intolerable. Yet I realized that in a country where so many people go without food, one cannot leave food on one's plate. So at that moment I looked up at this man with a look which I hoped would convey my anger and irritation. He had just overpowered him. He was looking directly at me, and I saw that my look didn't faze him one bit. He was just carrying out Maharaji's orders. It was as simple as that. After all, he knew that Maharaji was compassion itself. If Maharaji said we must have sweet, so we must, irrespective of our wishes. Dada had become so much an instrument of Maharaji that there was no space between the order and its execution. Such a level of surrender was hard to comprehend. It was not as if Dada was a separate being serving Maharaji. He was the service itself. Gone was the decision making process which chooses from moment to moment to serve. That self conscious decision making process that is all too familiar to most of us. I recall one day watching Dada serve Maharaji. Maharaji was in a forceful mode, shouting orders in all directions for the maintenance of the temple and the serving of the devotees. From my vantage point on the sidelines, I saw that he was giving many of these orders to Dada, and some of them seemed contradictory. After all, Dada was only one person, and yet Maharaji seemed to be asking him to do two things at once. Yet Dada never got the least bit upset, nor did he attempt to explain the contradictions to Maharaji. He would just say, "Yes, Baba," and do whatever it was that Maharaji demanded most recently. I watched closely. At one point, Maharaji yelled, "Dada, go get Binod." Dada was halfway across the temple courtyard on this errand when Maharaji yelled, "Dada, come here." In mid step, Dada's body turned immediately, responding to the new order which counter demanded the earlier one. Here I saw two things. First, there was no momentary lag when Dada had to process the inconsistency of the orders and decide which to follow. More amazing yet, and something I saw at other times as well, Dada seemed to respond even as Maharaji uttered the first sound of the new order, as if he heard Maharaji's intention before the words were out. The intimacy between these men reminded me of the one pointedness of mother child love. When a mother can recognize her baby's cry from a great distance, I once heard a saying about the tuning of true devotees to their guru. They hear his faintest whisper above earth's loudest song. They see his slightest signal across the heads of the throng. In the late night darkness, Didi comes from the kitchen, bringing us yet another cup of tea. It is long past bedtime, but what might sleep hold that could compare with this moment? Our hearts are as one in our love of him. We always want just one more story from Dada, for his faith never flickers. The purity, the power, and the obvious truth of his stories resonate deep within us, opening our hearts once again to our own innocence, reawakening in us our own perfect faith. Dada, tell us again, how did you meet Maharajji? Ramdas, San Anselmo, California, April 1989.